I call this meeting of the Davenport School Board to order. School board meetings are now open to the public, but the district will comply with Iowa Department of Public Health and the governor's recommendations as to gatherings and social distancing. To comply with the 6-foot distance directive, the boardroom has been arranged to allow 6 feet between attendees. This, however, is resulted in a limit being placed on the number of individuals from the public who may attend in person. Capacity of the room to allow for social distancing is 30 members of the public. Masks are required to be worn in the boardroom, but you may remove your mask if you speak. As with prior board meetings, you may access the board meeting remotely as well, but open forum will be in person only. Director Beck, would you please read the board priorities?
The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Director Postian, would you read the board mission and vision statements?
Mission statement: enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. Vision statement: education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
This is the time on the agenda where we usually do student board reports. So I want to welcome, we have 2 student board members with us. This is the first time we've had student board members since March. Casey Scott from North High School is here, and Ola Johnson from West High School. Have you been briefed on student board reports? Okay, does anybody have a student board report?
You want to go?
Yeah, I can go.
Go ahead, Casey.
Awesome. Cool, I got the mic to work.
Pull it closer to you. Like
It's just like this. All right. So at North right now, everything is just sort of getting started up again, as everything normally does at the beginning of the year. But I really have noticed an emphasis on, in addition to regulation accountability in terms of social distancing and wearing masks and stuff like that, there's a level of social accountability in terms of students keeping each other wearing their masks. So I had a conversation with one of the assistant principals at the beginning of the year, and we were discussing what we wanted to emphasize to freshmen that were entering North next year. And it was exactly that. It was just making sure that in addition to, it's not only that we have to, but we should be wearing masks, and we should be following the rules, because more than ever before, it's something that like keeps everybody safe. Whereas rules before, obviously, with some students are just rules are rules, but rules now are here for you and here for me. And if you're not following the rules, it's not only disrespectful to the teachers and the up aboves, but it's disrespectful to everybody. So I feel everybody has been very socially accountable in that respect. And then in terms of extracurriculars, I feel that there's been a lot of consideration in terms of event planning and meeting planning, a lot of accommodation for the hybrid students. I just had a meeting this morning that was a hybrid meeting. So there was a meeting that happened in school following the social distancing guidelines, but there was also an option that if it was your virtual day, you could Zoom into the meeting, which I did. It was awesome. And that was great. And even for online students, that access, that sense of accountability has really been emphasized.
So similar to North, we have a lot of teachers implementing the rules while also students are backing those rules up by making sure that everyone is accountable for it, for following the rules. So one thing that I think has been really interesting at West has been how we've made the rules, the social distancing, the staying in this area specifically, how we've made it fun and enjoyable for everyone. So for like some classes like band, for example, on the floors we have arrows that show which direction you're supposed to go. Some of the teachers have made hopscotch out of tape on the floor, so you have students playing around on those while following the rules at the same time. So I think that's also helped students feel feel comfortable with what's happening at the moment. And so other things that have happened, for extracurricular, we haven't really established anything specific. I'm not sure what's happening in terms of clubs, but for example, sports, I know those are going on right now, and we have students at the games, at the rallies, following the rules like social distancing along with wearing masks because those are required. And yeah, it's been a interesting 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but but yeah, it's also been a bit enjoyable too. So
Thank you both. Yes, sir.
Do you mind if I add? Awesome. So that just got me thinking. The staff at North too, and I'm sure that this echoes across all the schools in the district, I've noticed have really empathized with students during this time. Obviously, have been able to understand where students are right now, and even whether it's like a deadline with an assignment or anything like that, staff on all the levels are like, hey, we get it, we know where you guys are at right now, and we know, hey, it sucks, but they are very I know I keep saying it, but they're very empathetic towards students. So just had to add that in. Thank you.
Thank you. Board reports. Director Hayes?
Kind of on the lines of the student reports, I've been attending a lot of North football games, proud Wildcat grandma. So we've been going to North games, and I find that in order to get into the stadium, you need to wear a mask. However, we always sit in the student or right next to the student section, and there are no masks. And I've often wondered with the students, how is it or why is it that when you get in there that you take these masks off and they're talking and laughing and giggling and having a lot of fun with these masks off so close to one another. And that has been a concern for me in going to these games. But as far as behaviors and everything else is concerned, the students have been absolutely wonderful, but I do have some concerns about removing those masks when they get into that designated student seating.
Director Poston.
I'd like just to welcome the student representatives and appreciate you taking your time to come to the meeting. I visited with Ola a little bit. She's a senior at West. She's going to major in education with an emphasis in ESL. So HR, get her name and number, okay? And then another thing, I had Mary register me for a budget reduction workshop, and I'm reviewing that material along with Karen is going to be reviewing that material. And then I think Karen is going to have a follow-up in a board request concerning budget reduction.
Any other board reports? Move to communications, open forum. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at board meetings regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak should fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. Iowa Opens Meetings law prohibit action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president will set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak during open forum. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community during open forum. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. We'll be appropriating about 3 minutes for people to speak at open forum. When your name is called, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and tell us what's on your mind. First person is Georgia Jacklin.
Good evening. My name is Georgia Jacklin, 1931 East 50th Court, Davenport. I attended and spoke at the State Board of Education's meeting last Friday. I grew up in Davenport and graduated from West High. Our 5 children all graduated from North High. I taught in the Davenport schools, and many years ago I was on the board for 2 terms. The education of all children in this community has always been and will always be a high priority in my life. In fact, I'll tell you, I haven't even been in a grocery store since March, but I'm here tonight. Davenport has undeniably had equity issues in its district, and I know that there is no one on this board who would not want those addressed and remedied immediately. But Davenport is certainly not alone in this. The entire state of Iowa has equity issues. Our whole country has equity issues, and all of these need to be corrected and should have been corrected a long time ago. I would encourage the board to evaluate the state's mandates carefully. Quick decisions are not necessary. There's a lot of information that needs to be clarified and evaluated before you are pressed into a decision. The heart of any community is its schools. Our children need your courage and direction more than ever before. Frankly, I watched the State Board of Education participate in a meeting that appeared to have been pre-decided. Not only did they decide to undermine the Davenport School Board, they also chose to dismiss the wishes of the voting public of Davenport. This is extremely troubling on many levels. I know you don't want another fight on your hands, but our children's futures are yours to guide. You were elected to set policy and to hire a superintendent. I trust that you will have the courage to carry out these duties and will continue to take care of all the children in this place that we call home. I hope you can take a deep breath, and please know that you have support. Thank you.
Nikki DeFaw.
Nikki DeFow, 5070 Garner Court. I come before you today as a former school board member who, like you, has volunteered countless hours on behalf of this district. So thank you. Please do not let the state board meeting last Friday be the last word. The insinuations of misconduct levied against our staff were nothing short of slander, and to suggest this district does not take disproportionality seriously is outrageous. It is your imperative to defend the district from gross misrepresentations that defame its integrity and our shared integrity, no matter from where they originate. I am not under the illusion that any fact presented will sway the state board to change its mind, and I am not suggesting that we be uncooperative with the incoming superintendent at CFO. That is not the goal. The goal is to provide our community our stakeholders, our staff, and our families with a fair and accurate accounting of what has been done to address the citations against us. Do we still have work to do? Yes. Is the work we have done to date without merit and inconsequential? No. Going high when they go low has its place, but this is not one of them. In this case, the stakes are too high to leave unfounded charges lingering without a rebuttal. Thank you.
Steve Stoltenberg.
My name is Steve Stoltenberg, and I run Northwest Music Shop on Washington Street. So I usually just use the shop address as my address, 1411 Washington. I actually live out at Ridgecrest Village. I'm here tonight because of what I saw in yesterday's Quad City Times. On the front page, there was all the cheerleaders from North High School kneeling during the national anthem. I think that is very wrong. I think these kids should be taught a little bit about what people like me that were in the service and anybody else here that was in the service has done for this country. And if it's not done with administration, then I think the school board should be taking a lead in this to instruct the administrators. When I tried to call the school today, I got nothing but the runaround. Actually, your board secretaries thought I should come tonight, so that's why I'm here. Because we've got to teach these kids to respect the country and the flag, and it's just, first off, and the other thing is, I thought it was very poor for the Quad City Times to put that on the front page of the Sunday paper. I think there's a lot of other news that deserve more place than the kids kneeling for the national anthem. So I think as a school board, you need to instruct the administrators to teach a little bit to these kids as far as to respect the country and everything. The other thing is, well, this doesn't have anything to do with this, but I think also you need a dress code for these kids. When I've been into some of these schools, I'm sorry, they look like bumps, some of these kids running around in the school. So I think you need to enact some kind of a dress code so they look like decent people. But the main thing is this thing about respecting the country, and that needs to be taken care of first. So that's all I have.
Cindy Winkler.
Good evening, and thank you so much for your dedication to the students in Davenport schools. We're lucky to have you. I've been actively listening and in some cases participating in several of the state board meetings. I attended in person both the state meeting, the SBRC meeting a year ago. There was enough time. I'm sorry, I didn't start with my name and address. Cindy Winkler, 630 Court, Davenport, Iowa. I've been actively watching and doing my homework in regard to what the school board, the state board sees in front of them. I was at the SBRC a year ago. I was also at the board meeting a year ago while reports were being given. And at that particular time, they indicated that although certainly there were things that needed to be addressed, that there was forward progress in regard to the plan. I remember Tom Lane saying that in order to resolve the issues, it was a marathon, not a sprint. I'm not really sure what happened between then and now in regard to the attitude of the state board and the Department of Ed but it certainly has shifted. I want to address, though, the information that really concerns me, or the lack of information that concerns me, as a direction from the State Board or the State Department of Ed. I had asked specifically to get a copy of the minutes, actually the wording of the amendment. So first of all, the State Board, in their report on Friday, said the State Board imposed the following additional conditions under its authority to provide temporary oversight and operational authority to the director and the State Board in the following respect. Iowa Code Section 256, subsection 11, subsection 11A. The State Board should appoint a superintendent and a chief financial officer to complete the action for the district at the district's expense. So then during the conversation, in regard to that particular motion and looking at the information, the question came up about we are not going to be replacing the superintendent. That is a local control issue. She went, and this is a quote from the presentation. I want to make clear that this does not mean that anyone is being fired. The hiring and firing is a matter between the local board, the people that they choose on contract, and the people they choose to have on contract. So this does not mean that the local board needs to fire the people who they currently have on staff. She further clarified that the current superintendent and the current CFO may lose their decision-making authority over the things that the State Board is taking over, but no one is necessarily being dismissed. This is a matter to be taken up by the local board. So as I thought about that comment, and I thought about then the motion that was made by one of the board members, it was moved and seconded that the board accept the staff recommendation to implement a new CFO, a new superintendent, and that the Department of Education and the Mississippi Bend AEA and the Davenport School work on a time frame as to when the transition will occur. I'm a state representative. I thought, okay, let me go to the code, or let me go to the administrative rules and figure out what this next step is. You can't be a team player if you don't know the rules. And I asked, so I thought about what those questions were, what questions I would look for in the code. Questions like, first of all, does any guidance exist? If not, how does the process work? In assigning it to the AEA, is there guidance elsewhere? What authority does the local school board have now versus what they had previously? And what I have found out, even by a search of our legislative service agency, there is no guidance. There is nothing in code that identifies the next steps. Nothing. Because this is unprecedented, that the Department of Ed and the State Board of Education didn't stay the course, didn't keep growing excellence for every child as a key in their decision making. So I ask you, please, on behalf of the students in our Davenport School District, the 14,500 students, stay the course. Take your time, do your homework, think about what it is you really need to do, what that agreement will be with Mississippi Bend, with the Department of Ed, because there is nothing in writing for them to follow. That troubles me. The fact that they have placed a school district in this kind of situation is unprecedented. There is nothing that any other state board of education has ever done. And I would like to think that a state board of education and a Department of Ed, if they were taking that step, they would at least have guidance on hand to share not only with the department or not only with the school board, Davenport, and the AEA, because there is too much at stake for us to go through the kind of situations that have been happening. And at the very end, I know that you are dedicated to the growing excellence for every child. And our community expects that as well. But we take pride in our schools, and no action from the State Board of Education can take that away.
Katie Gancher.
I think it's working, yeah. My name is Katie Ganchert. I live at 3235 Middle Road in Davenport. I have 2 children who attend McKinley Elementary School. One's in 6th grade and one is in 2nd. I know this year has been full of challenges, and I wanted to thank the board and the administration for working so tirelessly to overcome them. And I realize a lot is going on right now in our district, but I think at the crux of everything is the issue of equity for Black and Brown students. Our family moved from the Bettendorf district to the Davenport district because of its diversity. And this, we think, is a great strength of the Davenport school districts. And as such, I think we have an immense responsibility now more than ever to recognize and understand and address racial injustice. I don't think good intentions are enough. In order for our district to provide an education that is inclusive and safe and equitable for all students, we need a plan of action. Anti-racist curriculum, stronger representation in our staff, bias training for our teachers. I think this needs to be a top-down model where our administration is providing the necessary support and resources so that our K through 12 educators can do this work and do it well. I want to commend the addition of an equity innovator and encourage Davenport Community School District to support this role to its fullest extent. I also applaud Allison Beck's suggestion to read a book together in order to better understand the ways in which racial injustice manifests itself in our classrooms and our schools. I personally recommend Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Beverly Daniel Tatum. I think these are good starting points, and I'm hopeful that despite the challenges we're now facing, and maybe even because of the challenges we're facing, we can continue down this path in order to create a real positive impact on our students' lives and collective futures. I just want to thank you again for all of your work on behalf of the families and the students.
David Feeney.
Do I hit the button here?
You're good to go.
Oh, good to go. Nope, no, I'm not. Okay. David Feeney, 826 Northbrook Drive, Davenport. I had a couple things I wanted to talk about, but I would like to piggyback on a lot of what I've heard here. And I ask a lot of people, I don't understand proportionality. I just don't understand it, and it's not for lack of effort. It seems like the state has an idea that everything's going to fall perfectly in these mathematical quartiles that I don't know if that's realistic or not. The other thing I would say is it seems to me for 3 years, it looks like the state education board is on offense and Davenport School Board is completely on defense. Like we're having to explain every little item to them. And my suggestion would be when this new superintendent comes here, sit them down and say, okay, this is what we're doing. Specifically, tell me what you want us to do. You know, specifically. I'm amazed at the abuse they seem to give to the Davenport Community School District. It really doesn't make sense to me. I'd also offer this, being in corporate accounting for 37 years, there's obviously a problem here, okay? I can tell you what would happen out at Alcoa if there was a problem that was the biggest problem they can imagine. I guess a way to describe it would be a firehouse mentality. What do I mean by that? not just your people in special ed. You pull out 5 or 6 people in your entire organization and just say, listen, we're giving you X amount, 2 months, 3 months. This is your job. I don't care, your job with a curriculum someone else is going to do. Get your very best people to work on it. And frankly, and this happened to me and a couple of our accounting groups, we don't like to get micromanaged, but to get things done, maybe you got to micromanage. Maybe you need to have someone, people who are in charge, have a staff meeting. Say, this is the agenda of the staff meeting, go one step further. The 6 people that are here, this is their task in front of them. At the end, have a recap of that. You got to have people responsible. And, you know, I just would urge you to look at your whole staff of people and say, you must know this. If there's ever a time to think outside the box, I think we're right here, right now. And I would urge you to get the great potential of maybe people you wouldn't ordinarily think would be involved in this and try to use them. And just in closing, Ms. Winkler, I think she said some really agreed with everything she said. I guess one other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to call the Quad City Times tomorrow. I don't understand proportionality, and I'm going to ask the Quad City Times to do an article on it, because I just don't understand how the state can dictate to you guys what you're doing wrong. And maybe if they do an article, it makes sense. I just don't understand it. Thank you.
Joyce Klepp.
I'm Joyce Klepp, 1431 Ripley. I'm just a few blocks away at Hope at the Brick House, and we run an after-school program and summer program with kids, and currently have 28 students, different days, and representing 16 family units, just to give you a little bit of a perspective. But I've been in the neighborhood for 35 years working with kids, and I'm here because of the concern with the online and hybrid education and what's going on right now, and just the families that I work with and their responses. And I'll just shoot to the end of it and say I just really encourage a survey to go back out to parents and teachers alike to see exactly where we're at and what's going on. And I hope that's in the near future, because I think there's some really deep concerns, and I appreciate hearing the other end of it somewhat from the students that were here tonight. But I have parents who are saying 100% put my kids back in school. They signed up for online education to start with because they had no other options. They didn't know how to work and how to babysit and what to do. I have a parent that's working 3 13-hour days, and she works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and thought that she could do education, most of her education, on those other days. She had a babysitter that was signed up to help, or was on target to help. The second day, the babysitter said, I can't do this. I don't understand. I'm not doing it anymore. This mom called me and said, is there any way you can help? And I started getting her child during the day because I already have a full load after school. And so as I started working with him, he's a first grader getting possessive nouns as homework. He's getting, he has an online meeting with teachers. An hour of that meeting was a show and tell hour. I realize that's important and fun and that kind of thing, but the entire meeting was show and tell. Another day, the teacher's computer froze the entire time, off and on, and she ended the meeting in 20 minutes. And that has continued with the Google meetings that has gone on. This mom was told that her son was not in attendance because he hadn't signed in by 3:30 each day. That mom gets off work at 9 and they get home at 9:45, and she tries to go over one thing with him each night before he goes to bed, and the next morning tries to encourage him with the day. He has gotten to the point of saying, I don't want to do this anymore, and he's in first grade. I have another parent who 2 days in a row came home to a fourth grader in tears. She works, and 16 of over half of my parents work healthcare jobs. This mom came home and her daughter was in tears, a fourth grader. The mom said, "Don't worry, we'll work. We'll work at it. I'll help you." She worked another 4 hours. At the end of the night, 9 o'clock at night, the next morning at 8 o'clock, the teacher posted new assignments and said, "I posted the wrong thing yesterday. You need to do these." The mom called the teacher and explained what they had done, and the teacher said, "I'm sorry, but you need to do the assignments I just posted." Another parent has 5 kids from first grade to high school. One high schooler is an honor student and dual enrolled. Another one has an IEP. She explained at the IEP meeting that was on the phone that this student cannot grasp online learning. Right now, currently, he's not only doing assignments online from school, but Edgenuity online, because that's what they first signed up for, and then also in the classroom, and he's totally overwhelmed. A kindergarten student had only 2 months of preschool. He doesn't know his letter sounds or letters. I realize that's not the teacher's fault, and I'm not here to bash anybody. I have a passion for what's going on, and I'm behind what's going on and want to be supportive. But those issues have not been addressed, and we're addressing them through our speech pathology students from Ambrose, because nothing's been done. And I realize that there's some parent accountability and other accountability, but if he was in school, that would have been caught right away, I think. And some things could have been done, but right now it's very, very difficult. And I get him during the day for at least 4 hours a day, and he's in kindergarten. A first grader was on Edgenuity, and for 3 weeks her guardian was told that she had not signed into classes. We consistently could not get signed in. I couldn't either, and I'm a teacher by career. She was told, "Just sign in your name and your birth month." And again, this was on Edgenuity. Last Friday, I asked for the login information, and she was told, and she has some learning deficiencies, she was told to sign in her name and her birth month. They had entered her name wrong and misspelled it, and no one was told. And so I caught it when the new login information came through, and so she just started her education this week. I've talked to students as I've picked up kids, or teachers as I've picked up kids, and just asked them how they feel about having the kids in the classroom and the risk of what's involved. And I had one teacher that said, "I can only speak for my team, but I want my kids here, and I'd go 100% with the risk." But I also talked to another teacher, and I know not everybody's in that same position. But that's why I encourage a survey to go back out, because I think we really need to assess where things are at right now. And I can tell you that 100% of these kids' parents are saying that they don't feel they're getting taught when they're online. And again, a lot of it's because of deficiencies that they have maybe, and not as much support at home, but it's not because parents don't care and don't have passion, because those parents are in my building trying to figure out how to do it and trying to figure out what they can do to be of more help. So I just appreciate you listening and hope that we can assess it again. Thank you.
Patrick Peacock.
Thank you so very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Patrick Peacock. I reside at 220 East 37th Street. I am not here in my official capacity. I'm the 7th Ward Alderman here in Davenport. I wanted to come and express to you, because I know many of you on this board, some of my friends and others I hope to get to know better. I watched the meeting Friday with the state board, and before I go there, I want to address something somebody said about disproportionality and what's going on in the world. And one of my things I was raised upon is the statement that education is the key. Education is a great equalizer. No one can take that from you. So when somebody addresses education, someone talks about the kids, that's when Pat Peacock gets involved. For you see, I'm born and raised Southside Chicago, attended the military, but I have no kids. So when I see a young man that looks like me, a young girl that looks like me, I get highly involved, I get concerned. As I watched the State Board of Education meeting, and they addressed some things that, of course, I wasn't knowledgeable on, but I made myself quickly knowledgeable on those issues quickly before coming here. But I was concerned because, as one put it in that meeting, no one spoke about the kids. No one. I'm quite sure, and I looked around this room before I came in, I was here earlier as well. There are some people who have terminal degrees, PhDs, some with master's degrees. So that tells me they should know better, that they know that at the end of the day, we're here to do a job, and that's to take care of the kids. There's a young man in this room, and I get choked up when I see him because I know I'm doing the right thing because he sees me, and I'm going to say what's right on his behalf because there's a lot of kids that's not here today. Their parents are not here because they can't afford an opportunity to come and speak to you today because they may have second and third jobs. But I will speak for them today. I was quite concerned as many people in this room, and I heard some of other elected officials speak on their behalf, and I'm quite sure we need to build bridges to address some of these issues. But the underlying issues that the children that need to be educated. I'm not going to get into the 2,000 violations. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into the $4 million that was unaccounted for, according to the State Board. I'm not going to get into that. But that needs to be addressed because those things could be gone to the students. Those are precious resources that schools and students can be made available to. Disproportionality. There's a point, and I want to hone this in, and I'm going to be very brief. If I was appointed a job, and they said, well, you need to complete this by the end date, and I failed to meet that end goal, I would probably be relieved. I could imagine people in this room way smarter than me, I'm quite sure make way more money than me, had an assignment. It's called an action plan to address the 2,000 violations, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm quite sure I am. According to the State Board, it was incomplete. If that was me, I'm quite sure I'll be relieved. I was the United States Army. If I had to turn my paper in, to my report to my colonel, young captain, you are relieved of duty. Because at the end of the day, there is what we call repercussions. But these repercussions are our children. And once again, I get fired up. Please excuse me. Because that is my legacy. That young girl, that young boy that looks like me that cannot be here today. And when we say we don't have the money, I'm going to call BS. We do have the money. And hopefully that the city council, school board can work together to address some of these issues. I'm not here as an antagonist. That's not my role. But I want to know that there's a young man named Pat Peacock that's going to sit in the back of this room and speak truth to power because no one else can. I will speak up for the kids each and every day. Until that gets to every elected official that understands this, then we need to have a side conversation on what's really important. It's the people, the students in this great area, in this great district. And if anybody needs to talk to me, I'll be in the back of the room.
We'll now move to the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move the board accept the consent agenda as written.
is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Beck. Is there any discussion of the consent agenda? Being no discussion, we'll move to the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. Chair will entertain a motion on the approval of bills.
Mr. President,
Director Beck,
I move that the board adopt the following resolution recommended by the administration for the adoption of the bills from the bill listing periods of September 10th, 2020 to September 23rd, 2020, and September 25th, 2020. Resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of September 10th, 2020 to September 23rd, 2020, and September 25th, 2020 for the following voided checks as presented for wrong amount.
is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Discussion? Being no discussion, move to the vote. Director Beck?
I had a question. Sorry. When these say wrong amount, these, is this just a clerical error? There was a minor typo?
So when the bills were presented to us, we upload them into our system. And when we were putting the checks together, we noticed that there were some with some incorrect amounts. So we just voided them and replaced those.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Move to the vote. Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, the motion carries. Superintendent's report?
Mr. President, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to give the report this evening. I wanted to begin by discussing the level of community, knowing that we've been in school now for the last 3 weeks, and obviously there was a great deal of planning to get our school year off to as positive of a start as possible. And I have a thank you that I'm going to read to a whole host of folks. But a few days ago, I had spoken with regard to the work and the efforts that have been put forward on behalf of the students here in the district to get them off to a good start this year. I had spoken specifically at the state board meeting, for example, how as a result of board action with our MediaCom contract, we now have an additional 300 students who in the past would not have been able to afford internet access, and we've been able to make those connections to over 300 households in the district, with more to go. So, but I'm proud of the fact that we were helping our students get there. I had also mentioned, as you all know, that we have a number of students with special needs in the district, and from August 3rd till now, we've conducted nearly 2,500 individual IEP meetings, which are all designed to make sure that whichever learning platform our special ed students have signed up for, whether it's the hybrid model or the online model, that the IEP teams know and that the teachers know that we need to make the appropriate modifications and accommodations for each one of those students. And we've had, since August 3rd, almost 2,500 meetings to make sure that those students can assimilate into this new learning environment, especially those students at risk. We've also heard, and I spoke also on Friday, the fact that there's a new federal program to feed and help families in need, families that are in poverty. And we served over 5,000 meals last Tuesday, where people were lined up around the street to get the free meals from our school district. And my hat's off to the entire operations department as well as our food service staff. We know there are tremendous needs during this time of COVID, and as a significant part of this community, our school district is not only committed to our students, but can certainly speak to the fact that we are trying to do everything we can as a community partner to help, knowing that there's a great deal of distress in our community. And these are a couple examples of the hard work that have been part of the planning process, but now are part of the implementation process to ensure success of our students moving forward. I wanted to make that point. Now, we're told by the state that we cannot speak specifically to to the COVID numbers that we have within our district. And I can assure you the health and safety of not only students, staff, but our entire community has always been on my mind for the last 6 months, every single night. As I mentioned before, there are a number of individuals who were very critical of decisions such as, not to hold a face-to-face graduation or opening up weight rooms. And I've been very sensitive to the health concerns, and that's why we've made the recommendations that we have. I can tell you, and I'm looking for some wood to knock on, we're fortunate. We've been lucky. I can't give you the COVID numbers, but the attendance rates for both students and staff that we've had over the course of the last 3 weeks are pleasing to me, and it's my hope that we can continue in that positive direction as I watch other school districts. And I wish them all the best, because we're all struggling to do the same thing, and that's to keep people, students, staff, families healthy and safe, yet at the same time provide those educational platforms, which we've heard from everyone tonight, which are necessary. And our goal is to continue moving forward with that. So I'll have a few more comments with regard to return to learn and some of the adjustments that we know that we need to make. We're 3 months into a plan. But as we all know, that plans need to be revisited, and if we need to tweak in a model of continuous improvement, we will certainly do so. If we need to make significant changes, we will certainly do so, and I'll speak to that in a little bit. But if Mr. President would allow, I would like to say thank you. And we know that there have been some questions and challenges as we navigate the start to such a unique school year, and we want to make sure we say thank you. Thank you to our students for their flexibility, positive attitudes, eagerness to learn, and adaptability for learning and adhering to a whole new set of safety standards and learning formats. Thank you. Thank you to our parents and guardians for your patience, helping us with adjusting to a brand new way of school, support of your students' learning, and grace with our professional colleagues here. Thank you, parents. Thank you to our teachers and professionals for your dedication to the best possible outcomes for our students, your drive and passion for education, and for your flexibility and hard work as you adapt to a brand new way of teaching our students. We know that the past 3 weeks presented challenges for some, I might even say many, with a few bumps in the road, and some of those bumps have been bigger than others. But please know we are listening to your feedback. We will continue to make changes to best support our students. Thank you. Mr. President, that concludes my superintendent's report, knowing that much of our conversation later on this evening with regard to return to learn, I will have some more specific information, as well as just a very brief commentary on the state board meeting as a clarification. Thank you.
Any questions for the superintendent at this time? Okay, we'll move on to items requiring action. May I have a motion on the approval of the TAP contract?
Mr. President,
Director Beck,
I move that the board approve the TAP Transition Alliance Program contract in the amount of $143,861.92.
is there a second?
Second.
Who is that? Director Hayes? Thank you. Any discussion? I'll start with the superintendent.
Again, thank you, Mr. President. This is a very important program to the school district, especially our special needs population with regard to transitional programming. It's a relatively new program, and if you take a very close look at the information that was provided to you, not only is it the details and an explanation of what this program does, but as we know, it's very important that we look at data and we look at the metrics when we make a decision. So as we ask you as a Board of Education to approve a contract or have a discussion, we would like to make sure that there's data and there are metrics that justify the administrative recommendation that you're seeing. One of the things I would like to do is, as you know, Dr. Schmitz has been very instrumental in moving our special education programming forward. I've asked her to include the metrics within this particular contract so that the board understands why we're making this recommendation, where we are right now, and where we hope to go once this program is approved for continuation and allows it to develop our transitional program. So Dr. Schmitz, if you could give just a little bit of background, again, on the program itself, but the metrics that we're seeing and why we're making this recommendation today. Thank you.
As you can see from the proposal, this is a really well done program as far as helping our students with IEPs transition into a number of different areas throughout as they move into their post-secondary career. And the metrics that Dr. Kobilski is talking about are ones that we are required to federally report on each year. We have, as a district, been significantly lower than the state average in those particular metrics. We started this program last year in an effort to help with that. The TAP is a program that is done by many districts in the state, including many of the urban districts, and it's basically a 50-50 relationship with the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. And it has some wonderful data to suggest that it is very effective in helping kids find jobs or go on to college or whatever their choice might be after they graduate from high school. We just started last year, and then of course we had a significant part of the school year cut out. So we're very new to this game, but we're adding 2 this year because of the numbers that we have here. We had 1 last year, but now we're adding 2 TAP coordinators and also a work experience role. So we're really excited about it and look forward to the effectiveness for our students as a result.
Thank you, Dr. Schmitz.
Questions, discussion? Director Beck?
So the percentages that are in our document here are the districts that are shown, Dubuque, I believe, in Sioux City, that have higher numbers. Are those districts that are already using this program?
Yes, Dubuque and Sioux City has, but also Cedar Rapids is as well.
And so those numbers are higher because they use this program.
They certainly contribute to it. I mean, there are a number of things that go into a child's choice or a student's choice after high school and how successful they are with it. But this has been proven to be a pretty effective program to help be able to better predict the outcomes.
Thank you.
Director
I would
Golson?
just add, Director Beck, that our goal is to get to those same numbers once we grow this program, know that we have more adults working this program, and then exceed those numbers and expectations.
Director Golson, you had a question?
How many students will benefit from this is my first question. I have a couple, but.
Boy, that's a good question. I'm not sure that I have that information with me. If you would like, we can come and do a presentation from you that would give a lot more detail into this particular program as far as how it pertains to Davenport and how we'll be able to grow it with the additional staff.
Okay, I would appreciate that. And then my other question, is that enough staff to adequately, successfully do what you need to do with this program?
It's funny that you asked that because we heard some giggles last year from some of our urban counterparts when they heard that we had 1. And because it does take a team of people, and to expand to 2 with the 1 work experience role will certainly get us a lot further down the road. But I think our experience with it will tell us in the next year or 2 just how many people we actually need.
So this is kind of like a trial to figure out how many you'll need to make it more successful, I guess?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a trial. I think that we're using our best guess at this point as far as who we need. But once we have more experience with it and more students that are profiting from it, we could certainly be looking at adding more down the road.
Okay. I'll look forward to getting some more information on that because I'd be curious to know how many students are benefiting from it to figure out how many people you would need to, because I imagine they would need more time with individualized
Exactly.
with each student or whatever.
Exactly, and it is very individualized with students, and so it's pretty exciting. I think you'd enjoy a presentation about it.
Thank you.
Director Hayes, then.
Dr. Smith, is this the same program that had some of the students going to St. Ambrose and helping them with the things that they were doing?
A student could potentially go to St. Ambrose from this, but St. Ambrose is different, that it's a fifth-year program, so those students have already graduated from high school. These kids are still in high school.
Okay, I like the fact that it would follow them up, mentor them up to age 25, which some of them would really benefit from that. One other thing I was kind of questioning, where will these funds come from?
There are weighted dollars. The students who are in the program generate weighted dollars due to their IEPs.
Okay.
So it's federal funds.
Okay, thank you.
Director Schneider.
My question kind of is along the same line as Director Hayes. In the cover page, it has the word grant in there, and I didn't know if this was being paid for by a grant or why it says TAP-grant.
Do you know that, Lisa? I'm not sure that I can address the terminology.
We consider it a grant because it is federally funded.
Okay. Was this in the budget, accounted for in the budget? And the reason I ask that is we just kind of towed the line with the state on Friday and told them as a district we're planning on having an unspent balance of about $700,000. Is this including this dollar amount?
I would say yes, it is.
Let me just add, it's important that as we interact with the federal government and with our grants, we prioritize our budget director, and we make sure that we know what grant amounts are available to us and make the appropriate allocations, knowing that we have an opportunity to fund a program through a federal grant, or we have an opportunity to fund there are multiple ways to fund programs. So our decision, we know this is an important aspect of what we're doing. It's a matter of prioritizing within our budget which exact pot we're going to draw from, and we chose this particular pot. But the idea is this is part of the overall budget to begin the school year. It's not an addition to what we budgeted for at the beginning of the year. The decision is really which pot do we take this money from, if that helps.
Thank you. I really like this program and the fact that once a student, say, is 18 or has gone through the system, we're basically telling that student we still have your back and we still support you, and I think that's huge. So I applaud this program and I hope it works as it's intended, and I hope to actually see more resources applied to this down the road.
Additional discussion? Director Gosa.
I guess when Director Snyder was talking about that, so this is funded through a grant?
It's funded through the weighted dollars that students generate as a result of having an IEP.
Okay, so it's like out of the special ed pool of money.
Yes. Our weighted dollars are determined by the number of students that we have with IEPs and the level of which they're receiving support.
Okay.
And so this would come from that particular pot of money.
I was just trying to make so it's not out of the general fund. It's
No.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any additional discussion or questions? We'll move to the vote. Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, the motion carries. May I have a motion on the approval of policy?
Mr. President,
Director Beck?
the Policy Committee recommends the board approve the Code of Ethics policy.
Second.
Is there a second? Oh, Director Poston seconded? Ah, you're moving faster than I can ask. Discussion on the policy.
Is this the second reading though?
Go ahead, Director Gosa.
This is only the second reading, right?
This is the final reading, correct?
I thought normally we had to do it twice, and then, but if we can do it, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make sure.
This is the vote one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Discussion? Move to the vote. Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Poston?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, the motion carries. Discussion items, Department of Education update. Superintendent?
Mr. President, quick comment in the sense that very similar to when the COVID pandemic struck, there were far more questions that were lingering out there than answers. And as a school district, we are doing everything we can to try and get more clarity from the outcome that came on Friday. But I thought it was very, very important to clear up what potentially could be a misconception out there. First of all, it is absolutely true that we've submitted our certified annual report that shows a positive unspent balance. It's the first time since 2015 that this district has been in the black, so to speak, as opposed to being in the red. And we've submitted that report under the guidance and help and tutoring of the SBRC all along the way. That report has also been vetted with Gary Sinclair, who you've hired as your independent second set of eyes to look at that report. So that is absolutely true. There was one comment that was made at the meeting, and it was alluded to a little bit here this evening, and I have to make sure that we're perfectly clear on this. It was stated as a concern at the State Board of Education meeting regarding a drop in miscellaneous revenue. And it was stated at the State Board meeting incorrectly that we did not have an understanding of why we've had that drop in miscellaneous revenue. You heard this evening that there was $4 million that was somehow unaccounted for. That is simply not the case. We knew we had a drop in miscellaneous revenue as a school system. That drop was a result of factors that we know. For example, our Medicaid payments are down dramatically. We do not get Medicaid dollars from the federal government when students aren't physically present here in the school system. So from March on, our Medicaid payments took a nosedive. Also, the district does have a fund that is invested. Interest rates, everyone knows if you have a checking or savings account, don't even think of having an interest rate. That's certainly affecting our revenue. And also, we've had a number of private grants that we were counting on as a course throughout the entire year. And as you know, the world has changed. And many of our benefactors either don't have the funds that they anticipated having in order to forward those to our district, or they are struggling in and of themselves, working themselves through this pandemic. So let me make it perfectly clear. Yes, we've had a drop in our miscellaneous revenue, but we know exactly why we have a drop in miscellaneous revenue. Our accountants have been here. They've been in our school district. They will issue their final report. But at the end of the day, in addition to having that accounting taking place, the SBRC has informed us that we do not need to appear in front of them this year. Thank you.
Anything else on that topic? Director Gosa.
I just wanted to add, after our last board meeting and the presentation Gary Sinclair did for us with all the finances and all of the data in there, I'm perfectly confident with the data-based decision-making on that issue. Again, data-based decision-making. And he provided a lot of data, an obscene amount of data that I feel very comfortable that we are good with data-based decision-making. That's my third hit, and I'm going to leave that alone.
Thank you for providing us with that data. Next discussion item is student assessment update. I would remind the board that this discussion item conforms with goal number 5 on the board goals and superintendent's goal to emphasize emphasis will be placed on student achievement, and it also conforms with our communication and governance goal number 5, regular progress reports and board discussion on established superintendent and board goals.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as you know, our mission is to educate students, and student achievement is in many ways considered job one for us. As a result of the pandemic, I think everyone's aware that the state testing protocol has been suspended. So typically the longitudinal data that we would utilize to determine the growth of our students with regard to their academics has been interrupted. Yet I thought it was very important for the board to know that we are putting together a committee of the whole meeting, a board workshop that will be devoted strictly to student achievement data using the metrics that we still have available to us, knowing that the state reporting is no longer a metric that we can add to the conversation this year. So I've asked Associate Superintendent Scott, as well as other members of the team, to just give the board a quick synopsis of the types of assessments that are currently taking place in the district, because they are, despite the fact that the state is not, and sort of foreshadow what that assessment conversation will take a look at. So Associate Superintendent Scott, I have Director Guy, I believe, is here to talk specifically what are those assessments that we currently have in place so that we can keep track of how well our students are doing, whether it's COVID or not, and then how we will be presenting that data for you in a workshop, hopefully in the very near future.
Thank you. Good evening. Yes, tonight we're really just going to talk a little bit. Corey is from the lead of the curriculum department is going to talk about some of the assessments that still happened last year, because we still had school up through March, and then what assessments we're actually still doing this year. I know the Iowa assessments, a lot of information about that being canceled last year, but there still are many assessments we do throughout the year, and we'll be willing for questions. We just have a short presentation. So Corey, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, good evening. So when we talk about assessments, we give lots of assessments in our school, but it's important to kind of think about them in two categories. We have state mandated assessments and federally mandated assessments. Then we have best practice assessments. So I'm going to go through what are our state and federally mandated assessments and give you an overview of the data that we have for the past 3 years on those assessments. So the first one is we have our standardized assessment, which is the ISASP. It's old. It used to be called, Iowa Test of Basic Skills. That's changed, and we gave that first assessment, the Iowa Assessment of Student Progress, called the ISASS, in 2018-2019. So that was our first year giving that standardized test. Last year, due to school closure, we did not, the state suspended that assessment. We didn't have to give that. And so this year, we will give that assessment in April. The second one mandated assessment is the ELPA 21, which is a screener data for all students who are in our ELL programs. So that's a screener data given to students in kindergarten through 12th grade who get English language services. That was given starting in 2018-19. Last year, we were able to also give that before school closure, so we have that data, and we'll give that again this year. I want to go back to the ISASP. Along with the ISASP, for our students who need an alternate assessment, we give the dynamic learning maps. So that's another state mandated assessment. And then for students kindergarten through 6th grade, we need to give an early literacy screener. That screener is given 3 times a year. We have data on the FAST assessment going back 5 years, and we were able to give that last year. It's a screener that happens 3 times a year, and we were able to give that screener in the fall and in the winter. We did not give that screener in the spring due to school closure, but we have data going back 5+ years of FAST data for fall and winter. Then we have in preschool, another state mandated test is called the Gold Observation Based Assessment System. So there's 38 research-based objectives, and it's something that's given that the teachers give individually to every student, and they're looking for certain characteristics, literacy, numeracy, and then also behavior for how students are doing. And that is what the preschool teachers give. Then we have a lot of assessments that we give that are best practice assessments. So we have summative assessments. We also have additional screeners. So I said that the K-5, K-6 literacy screener is called FAST, and that's a mandated assessment, but we also give a math assessment that's a screener, and that's called A-Math, and that's given for students in first grade all the way through 8th grade. We have the same data, a reading, for students in first grade all the way through 8th grade. And we've given that based on that assessment for the last 5 years. In addition to that, we also have the COGAT screener, which is not state mandated that we have to use the COGAT, but we have to have a screening process to identify students in our talented and gifted programming. And we use the COGAT and have given that for the last 10 plus years for our students. Recently, we changed that screener from 5th grade to 3rd grade, so that starts in 3rd grade, and we have data on that for the last 3 years. I mentioned that beyond the state mandated assessments, we have best practice assessments. So some of the best practice assessments would be our summative data that's given with district-based benchmark assessments. So at the end of a term, those are given in kindergarten through 8th grade, and we also have finals and other summative assessments. This year, and some of you sat on the Return to Learn committees, we also gave pre-assessments. So pre-assessments were very important to us this year because we needed to see what was the learning and teaching gap, right, that happened due to school closure. That would not be assessment data that we could look at for when we give pre-assessments in that fashion in years previous, but it is data that we can look at this year to see where those learning gaps have occurred. In addition to that, this year we're giving the ACT. Now the state, it's not federally mandated, but the state 3 years ago had us do conditions for learning, and you might remember that's a survey that our students take, and we started that in 2018, 2019. Last year that was suspended, but we will give that due to school closure, but we will give that again this year in the spring. Another best practice assessment that we have, but it's starting this year, is the SEBH screener, which is a questionnaire given to students, and that will be completed November 1st. So that will be some of the metrics that will start. That will be a metric we'll start this year, and we'll continue to monitor that progress. So that's a lot of information for a short amount of time, so I'll take questions.
Just one more additional thing. We also look at the ACT, and we talked about that, and actually one of the opportunities we're providing for our students is the ACT that didn't happen last year. We're testing all of our high school seniors on October 6th this year because they missed out on their junior test day. So we've got that scheduled, and the curriculum department does a great job. This is their swing away, is looking at assessments, and really a strong group. I've been sitting in all the curriculum meetings since the start of the year, and an example of that is the K-1 testing. We made some accommodations of recommendations from the state on what our K-1 testing should look like, and I'm just really proud of the effort that they do in this area. So we're open for questions. Thank you.
So I guess I've got two questions. I was trying to keep track of what was state mandated, what was best practices. I didn't catch any federally mandated that were separate
From state.
Yeah.
So you have to do the ELPA 21.
Okay.
And you have to, federally, you have to have an English language screener. You also have to have a statewide assessment. So in Iowa, it's the ISASP.
Right.
And you have to have an alternate assessment for students who need that
Okay.
in special education.
Okay. And so my other question is, two acronyms.
Yeah.
What does FAST stand for, and what does COGAT stand for?
Sure thing. And I wrote it down because I forget as well. But FAST is Formative Reading Assessment System for Teachers. So FAST is a suite of assessments, and there are multiple assessments within the FAST suite. There's a CBM, which is a curriculum-based measurement for reading rate. A reading that I talked about is an adaptive assessment, and a math is an adaptive assessment that's within the FAST suite of assessments. So K1, there's an early literacy screener. So they're measuring literacy, is a screener to see if our students, where they need to be, are they projected to be on benchmark or at the right progress for literacy and math. And there's benchmarks that are set those 3 different times a year. Those benchmarks change by grade level and also by season. But FAST is kind of that overarching conglomerate of those assessments.
Okay, and so these are the things like fluency is separate from comprehension, is separate from speed, and okay. Okay.
So the CBM, so this year, and thank you, Associate Superintendent, for reminding me, but we did change, based on state guidance, our state mandated screener. We're still using that FAST suite, but before we would do early reading always. Early reading is K1, but starting in first grade, we would do CBM, which is read for a minute. We're going to see how accurate you are, if you're on pace with the amount of words correct per minute. Due to 100% online, it's a one-on-one assessment that takes a lot of teacher time, and to do that in a virtual setting is very difficult. The state this year said that, use the assessment that fits your modality of how you are returning to learn. And so we are picking A reading for second, which we always gave before. It's just our state it's what we would, our compliance assessment. We still have the CBM because it's part of that suite, and then we will give that for progress monitoring. But A reading is our default for second through 6th grade.
Okay. And then COGAT, what does that stand for?
COGAT, again, I'm so glad I took my notes, but COGAT is a cognitive abilities test. Okay. So it has 3 domains, and it's looking at verbal, quantitative, and nonverbal reasoning.
Okay, thank you.
Corey, could you email the board, or maybe Mary could do it, email all these assessments and the definition of each?
Yep.
Thank you.
You can do that.
I think.
Corey, could you tell me, all these state mandated tests, are we getting money from the state to buy these and do these tests, or is this all on the district?
No, the assessments are, they are unfunded mandates, so we have to give those assessments. The FAST suite, one of the reasons, FAST is, most districts across the state use the FAST suite, but we get a discounted rate with our AEAs, from the AEA. But we pay for the ISASP. We don't have a special funding source that's just for assessments.
And FAST tests, are they including comprehension, or is it just fluency and accuracy?
So the A reading is comprehension.
Okay.
Focused. Mm-hmm.
But the others are just fluency and...
The early literacy for K1 is going to be focused very much on phonemic awareness, phonics skills, early reading skills, and then the CBM is your fluency and your accuracy.
Thank you.
So my question is, after, I think you said you do these assessments 3 times a year, after they're done and you have the numbers and the data, can you send that to the board, or so that way we're keeping track of the data so we can make good decision making?
Absolutely. We
data-based.
And with the definition of all of these data points, I'll send the calendar of when we assess, when we give it, when we analyze it, right? And when that is shared with all of our attendance centers, all of our schools.
I would just add there was a key word that Corey mentioned. You have to analyze the data. Data, they're just numbers.
Right.
But what are those numbers tell a story? And it's very important for our team to be able to tell the story that the data is presenting. So it's just not a function of emailing the board data points without having an understanding of what this means, good, bad, or indifferent. Indifference, not the right word, but good, bad, or
Right.
that analysis is critical to that data conversation.
Okay. And then my other question, so do you take previous year's assessments and say they were in third grade, now they're in fourth grade, and do you kind of follow that to see if it's getting better and we're able to get all that data as well?
So when we analyze the screening data, for example, we'll use the analyzing and reporting our data template. It's called an AROD, and we'll look at cohort data. So you're looking at students in kindergarten last year versus how did they do in first grade. So we'll look at that, but we also look at grade level across years, because that gives you a good measurement of if you change your curriculum, if there is a practice that you're putting into place, the best practice of accelerated learning, is that making an impact from year to year, just looking at the grade level? But we also track student cohort data.
Are you able to also, I'm sure you do break it down by building, like which buildings might be more effective, I guess, and maybe it's the way that they're presenting it or teaching in that, and then use that as the model, I guess?
So within that AROD form, and we do that with teachers, with principals, so there's teams that analyze the data. We're looking at it by school building, by cohort, right, across the district, but also by subgroups, right? So we're looking at how are our EL students doing on those screeners, how are our students with IEPs doing, how are all of our low SES students, our high SES. So we're breaking it, and that's even broken down at the building level as well.
I'm sure you guys break it down like by the student. So like if a student went to a different, they transferred schools or something, then you would be able to track it by that. And then what we get is like an average of that class or whatever.
Yes. So the teacher has their pulse on each individual student. The student who's not progressing where they need to be, they have to do progress monitoring, and they have that. We're looking at some of those more, we're analyzing for those more global trends. We're not breaking down. We can look at it student by student, but that's really the teacher's job in the classroom.
So when you're analyzing the data is the word of the day, by the way. When you're analyzing the data, is there a team that's kind of going over this? Because obviously, if there are different factors that can make it better, or coaching could be provided or something like that, or some leadership or something, is like who's all part of that team that analyzes the data?
So it starts with members of our DSAT, which is our District Student Achievement Team. We have principals, teachers, our coach, some of our literacy coaches, our entire curriculum department will look at that. Then it goes to the building level. They'll look at their data. They then take it to the teachers. The teachers are analyzing it, making adjustments as necessary to what is needed in the classroom. So a great example is class-wide interventions is a best practice, and we've been doing that for 3 years. When our students at the class-wide level are below 60%, a class-wide intervention happens instead of just an individual student by student, because that says that something needs to be changed at a class level. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just looking for a lot of data.
Okay.
I appreciate that. I guess my last thing, I appreciate you answering all these questions and giving me all this data. And I like the fact that you're able to look at it and analyze the data and figure out a corrective action plan if you need it. And I think I covered all my bases, data and corrective action plans. So thank you.
And if I may just add, just to sort of maybe fly up a little bit higher altitude in terms of how we look at the data. Typically you'll see data in terms of national norms, where our students are compared to either their grade level cohort. You see that quite often, for example, and ACT is a perfect example. But we also have learned as educators over the years that growth data is so critical. So just that standardized norm-driven data isn't enough, because it just places you within a benchmark of where everyone else is. But at the same time, we know that from an individualized perspective of students, if we grow a student 3 grade levels in reading, but they're still behind in reading, that's still a significant accomplishment if we can grow them 3 grade levels in a year and move that forward. But we also do growth norms also. We know how much students should be growing, so that as we think of a framework for how to present this data to the board, we'll talk about how our students are performing in a normative way compared to other students, but we'll also talk and spend a great deal of time about growth, because as educators, that's what we do. We grow students from point A to point B, and our job right now, especially in an environment where we have learning challenges and COVID, we have to accelerate that learning. We have to accelerate that growth, and that was part of our return to learn plan model. So that's going to be the overall structure of the conversation. The details will be the metrics that Corey Guy was describing to you. And a few more questions? Sure.
I was just asking how, if I'm not mistaken, but I just want to make sure, these feed into that, like the Iowa school report card, right? So how does that relate? Because those are some of that I remember was broken down by school, by district, by building, or by grade level, and it had some of those A reading and A math results. But I guess I just want to know sort of what of those assessments feed into that.
Sure. So in the school performance profile, what is everything that's federally mandated feeds into that. So your ISASP,
okay,
your ELPA 21, and also they take into consideration the conditions for learning.
Okay.
On top of that, Iowa's a little bit more complicated. And prior to ESSA, they had something called the school report card. You might remember that, and that was something that was occurred through legislation. So that adds a layer of the screeners on top of that, so you can actually toggle back and forth on that site to look at, here are the things that are for federally the ESSA things, and here are all the additional must-dos.
Okay.
Is the best way to say that. So within that, there's some things with attendance, teacher retention rates. You might remember some of those from the state report card.
Okay, thank you.
Linda?
Corey, I have a couple of questions for you. With all of this information and data being available, a couple questions. I know the benchmark is 3rd grade. With that, it seems like we would be able to catch this earlier and do something to close the achievement gap. So with the things that are going on, like with the pre-K and the kindergartners, is there something in there measurable that we can kind of target and look to see what's going on with them and prevent some of this from happening rather than waiting till 3rd grade?
Absolutely. So that's part of the analyzing and the data and looking for those trends. Is there something happening in kindergarten over the years as a cohort to ensure that the right universal instruction happens first in the classroom, and then students who need interventions get those interventions. So that's why we do the screener 3 times a year. In fact, it's this week for all of our hybrid students are taking those screeners, and our online students will take it in the following week. So we have that information so that teachers have it early and can be proactive, right, in their approach to what students need in the classroom.
Okay, with some of this starting in 18, what's your estimate on about how long it would take that we can actually see some results from what's taking place?
So you mean the screener is occurring now?
Right. You said that some of this started in 2018-19. With those tests, like projected, how many years would it take before we can actually see the growth in students?
So we have seen some growth in students over the last 2 to 3 years. We've seen us go from 60% to almost 70% proficient, right? In certain areas, we've seen proficiency rates increase on ISAS. It's always in analyzing the data, ensuring that it is this implementation that's making that growth, and let's continue to do that implementation because that's where we're seeing the growth. Just giving the assessment, it doesn't do much other unless you're acting upon that assessment and prioritizing what needs to happen.
Okay, with everything that's going on, I guess, with all of this technology that we have, I would really love to see some decline in that gap, here soon rather than it lingering on. And I guess my last question here is, what are the subgroups for this data, and how's it broken down, and who comprises these teams?
Okay, so when the data is analyzed, we break it down by, like I said, English language learners, students with IEPs, male, female, and then race and ethnicity, and low SES.
Okay, thank you.
Director Schneider?
Just a quick question. You had talked about assessments that are following students, say, from third grade now to fourth grade to fifth grade. Years back, I don't think as a district we did as much of that type of assessment that actually followed the students. It was more comparing, say, fourth graders this year to fourth graders the year before and fourth graders the year before that. I'm really glad to hear that as a district we're focusing more on assessments that are following students, because we have so many different interventions, methods and that we have to use that I was just never comfortable with comparing kids of 1 year to the year before to the year before. I'm sure if you would have compared me, I would have made a whole lot of kids look pretty brilliant. So I'm really glad to hear that we're doing these assessments to follow these kids that, so they're not falling through the gaps, basically. So thank you.
Anything else? Director Gosa? Don't say that.
That was my first word.
No.
Along the lines of the assessments, and then after you analyze it, and if you need supports, what all supports are available? I'm going to ask for gen ed and special ed to help raise the assessment scores for the second time, and then from the second time to the third time they're tested throughout the year.
So let me jump in and answer that question. It's dependent on what the need is. So as we do our assessments, the supports that we offer our students to enhance and mitigate the issues that we're seeing are dependent on what the data is telling us. So we have an extremely wide variety of supports that we have in place for students. And I would just suggest, rather than just giving you a list of what we do, explaining, for example, a metric that we have, and then attaching the supports that we have to help support that metric. So that board workshop that we will be scheduling, that's the perfect time to say, here's our analysis of the information, now what? And that now what is, here are the supports that we have for reading, here are the supports we have for English language learners, here are the supports we have for, and just go down the list. And it is a long list, but I think it's very important for us to really dig down and understand what all those are, as opposed to just naming those. I mean, we could tonight, but we'd be here a long time. It's an excellent question, but I think context is important for each one of those programs to know how they fit the individual needs of the students that we have in the district.
Okay. And my final thing, can you send us like an example of what the assessments entail, like what's in there, just so we kind of have that?
A sample of I'll
The
put it
assessments.
for yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just would like that information just so we can kind of see.
Would you like that as part of your homework going into the workshop, or is that an immediate?
I just kind of was trying to get a little more data on it, but thank you. I'm done.
I have something.
Yes.
You ran off a very extensive list of district-generated assessments, state-mandated assessments, federal-mandated assessments. Has there been any discussion in the curriculum department about how much testing takes place? How much, I mean, is there any data? Is there anything that how much time does a student spend in the course of the year being assessed? And are we assessing a necessary amount or an excessive amount? And you know, that's, I don't have an answer for that. I just remember my time at senior, we were spending lots of time giving tests. Lots of time given tests.
So we have analyzed that, the amount of time an assessment. So an example is we used to give a reading and a math in kindergarten. Well, those kindergartners didn't need to be taking an online assessment, adaptive assessment 3 times a year. We had early reading, and that was sufficient, and the teachers had observation data that they were using. So that's an example of us kind of weeding the garden, right, about what is really necessary to give students the interventions that they need and the supports that you were referring to, Director Gosa, and when, you know, this isn't necessary.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll move on to an update on the return to learn plans.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I alluded to earlier in my comments this evening, that our goal was to have a robust plan, which everyone is very familiar with, but also have a plan that allowed for adaptations, whether they were adaptations that were necessary because of unexpected circumstances or just things that happened during this COVID outbreak. And we had a district-wide leadership meeting last week where we debriefed the entire first 2 weeks of our school year to say, first of all, what's working well, what's working right, and we had extensive conversation on that, and I will tell you we have a number of positive pieces that are out there. But then what are some of the areas where we know that we need to make some adjustments, perhaps even make a course correction of some kind? And first of all, please know that those conversations are taking place. They're taking place on a weekly basis, and we're making adaptations almost on a daily basis. A couple things that I do want to point out before I get into the actual programming piece. As you know, with COVID, if you've been familiar with the health department updates that have been given from last week, the metrics are suggesting that we're seeing a spike in cases of COVID in the area in Scott County. Now, again, I'm knocking on wood that as a system, we haven't been seeing those metrics within our system, but I don't want to see those metrics in our system. So I'm making a change to our mask or to our face covering protocols starting this week. As you may recall that given the fact that if our students and staff were 6 feet apart from each other, they could take down their mask. But if at any point they violated that 6-foot diameter, they had to put their mask on. Given the fact that we're starting to see evidence in Scott County that the numbers are not at all, not only are they not trending in a positive direction, but they're actually spiking at quite high levels when it comes to the positivity, where I'm going to alter the face covering requirement where individuals in our school must wear a face covering at all times, even if they are 6 feet apart. And we're learning a lot more. We're learning of some of the science associated with the aerosol effect of COVID. But at the same time, I don't want to wait for the numbers to get bad before we have to make the next decision. We will have mask breaks for our students. We will certainly allow them to take their masks off when they're eating lunch. If there's a particular situation with any individual student where they need to take their mask off, we will make accommodations to allow that to happen. As you've heard from our student representatives, they've been very good at reminding each other that this is important. And as I've been making my rounds to the schools throughout the first 3 weeks, I'm seeing astounding compliance within the buildings themselves. And I have found that when I've walked in the classrooms, even though they are 6 feet apart, they're still wearing their masks. And I think if by requiring this throughout the school day, I think that'll help keep everyone safe, and we're going to move in that direction. So that's one example of a change that's going to take effect, and we'll be making that announcement in the next day. With regard to programming, again, we have our hybrid model, we have our online model. Let me speak very specifically to the online model where we know we need to make some significant improvements. We agreed that we would move forward with Edgenuity as our learning management system and our platform, and most importantly, use Edgenuity teachers at the high school level to provide the instruction for our high school students, knowing that our high school teachers in particular, as well as all of our other teachers, are teaching classes all day long. Had a conversation with a number of my superintendent colleagues in the area because we've actually contracted with the AEA for this Edgenuity product and platform, and had the special pricing that was associated with that. But we're finding in all the districts in the area that we're seeing login issues where perhaps there was a miskey of a student name and all of a sudden the login didn't work. And we saw quite a bit of that the first 2 days of school of individuals struggling with login. We've solved most of those, but we still have a few glitches here and there when it comes to some of what I'll call the technical components of it. The other pieces with Edgenuity that have reached our ears are certainly the amount of work that our students are being asked to do. It's very, very significant and accelerated, and we have to take a close look at the pacing of our coursework so that our students, the way Edgenuity works is there's a dashboard and a dial that gives you a percentage of completion. There are some courses, for example, that have homework assignments where instead of asking do 5 quadratic equation problems, they're asking them to do 75 quadratic equation. We can't do that. We can't ask our, we should know after 5 questions whether or not they understand how to do a quadratic equation. So we're asking our teachers to go in and start modifying those required lessons. And we're asking our teachers to start going in now and doing that. At the same time, we're also asking Edgenuity. There are a couple Edgenuity classes that actually didn't even assign the teacher yet, only because I don't think Edgenuity realized, and we didn't realize we were going to have 4,000 students in our system. Edgenuity is a nationwide company. A lot of work is taking place in Iowa, and we have a meeting with them tomorrow morning to make sure that they understand what our concerns are. The point I would like to make with that is we need their assurances that all of these issues that we're seeing with Edgenuity need to be fixed, and we've worked with our team internally so that if we don't see these fixes that we would like to see by the end of this week, we have a plan in our back pocket that we will roll out with our teachers that will fill the void and make sure that our students not only can manage the work, but also learn along the way without being overwhelmed by all the work that's taking place. The technical issues that they've been experiencing, those need to be cleaned up, and those need to be cleaned up this week. And if they're not, we're willing to make a shift and move in a different direction. So I think it's important for the community to know that we're all our ears are listening to all the feedback that's coming our way with regard to our online platform, and we will make whatever changes we need to make to ensure that our students are learning and are managing the system properly, knowing that we created an online school over the course of the summer and moving forward with that. So we'll be taking a close look at Edgenuity. The other piece is with regard to students who we realized that families made decisions with not 100% of the information in front of them. And we didn't have 100% of the information. We didn't know exactly what an Edgenuity taught class by an Edgenuity teacher would look like. And we had to go in that direction because of the 50% requirement, but at the same time, we have to make sure that students aren't failing. And if we have students in situations where they're in the online school and it's in school platform and it's not working, and it's critical that they switch to the hybrid model, they need to reach out to their principal and have those conversations. We are not going to wait an entire semester or a quarter for a student to fail before we put them in an environment where they can be successful. It's a lot of work, and if there's mass movement, that's why we asked our families to commit. But I will commit to our families by saying that if we have situations where students are just absolutely struggling in any particular platform, as an educator, it's our responsibility to put them in a learning environment that they can succeed, and we will continue to do that. And I want the parents to take comfort in knowing that they can have those conversations with their principals. We'll do everything we can to rectify any particular issue. But once we've tried a number of steps along the way, if things for whatever reason aren't working, we'll shift gears and make them work, just to make sure that our students are achieving. Final two pieces that I have, and I was so glad that we had our students here this night, because what's been on my mind is not only the cognitive aspects of what we're doing and making sure that our students can learn in an environment that is entirely new to them, that they've never experienced before, but their social, emotional, behavioral health was so critical to our conversations over the summer, knowing that students hadn't been in school for 6 months. They haven't had an opportunity to interact with their friends, see their teachers, do a whole host of things that kids do. And we wanted to make sure that we put in a system that was caring. And hopefully you heard from our students tonight that we have a staff that understands this isn't all about lines in the sand. This isn't all about you have to do things. That we are going to make sure that our students from a social emotional perspective can continue to grow, not get overly stressed about this new learning environment, and we'll help them at every turn that we can, so that not only is this a successful academic year, but this is also a successful year in terms of child development and human growth. And I was pleased to hear, and I'm not at all surprised that our teachers are making the rules fun. I'm not at all surprised to hear that our teachers are very open-minded when it comes to the amount of work that they're giving students with homework assignments and when assignments are due. And that's a tribute to their professionalism as educators to know how to handle these situations. And again, I'm so pleased to hear that the students are whether they're having fun at football games, and we'll address the mask piece and take another look at that. But we want kids to be kids again, and part of that is learning, but also part of it is interacting with their peers and with their teachers. And I'm hopeful that our approach to that affective domain is serving us very well. The other concern that I have that is ongoing is as I walk into and I have opportunities to speak with staff and teachers in particular. When we originally submitted our Return to Learn plan, which was a 40% model, it allowed for a day of professional growth and conversations for our teachers to do their lesson planning, to get classes ready for their online courses, to have conversations with their colleagues with regard to how their students are doing. We've worked so hard as a school district to have professional learning communities, knowing the value of teachers talking to teachers. That time has gone away, because what's happening right now is our teachers are teaching classes all day long. When they're done with their classes at the end of the day, they go into the system and they get the assignments ready for the students that are online for those particular days. We've asked our teachers to do double the work that they've ever done before. They're doing it, but my fear is how long are they going to be able to do that from a stamina perspective. I've reached out to the state prior to last Friday to ask if we could have a conversation about perhaps how to manage our calendar and our day schedule. It came up at our AEA meeting with Amy Williamson last week, and she did offer her willingness to speak with any district that wanted the state's feedback on perhaps how we could alleviate what we're hearing is one of the major concerns in the state about teacher workload and burnout that we're starting to see right now. They're doing their jobs. They're doing their jobs well. We're asking a lot of them. They always come through for us, but we can't set them up for failure. We have to make sure that there's an opportunity for them to not only succeed for their students, but we have to make sure that we look out for their well-being as our employees and taking care of them. So I just wanted to share that. We've done some extraordinary things in a short amount of time. There's still work to be done, but I'll be happy to take any additional questions from the Board of Education, either on my comments or things that you feel that we need to hear as an administrative team.
Director Klein, you're up.
First, I am happy to hear that you are aware and dealing with the teacher workload, because I also have heard many comments and heard that there's much stress in that. I also want to ask you, did you say that the state has mandated, the state is telling us that we can't release COVID numbers of staff and students?
The state has told us not to do that. And they told us not to do that because there's the risk of potential identification of who those individuals may be, especially in a situation such as ours where the numbers are so small. It would be possible for people to figure out who actually had it. And so there were privacy concerns. And the state has actually said, please don't release those numbers
Okay.
as a system.
Because I know that the Iowa State Education Association has hired a person to track COVID cases in school districts because they don't trust that the state is going to be honest about the numbers and things are going to spike and people are not going to be aware of it. I have looked at the site. There are a lot of school districts. Davenport is not listed on there. I think it could be put out there in general. You know, we have 5 cases. Not saying a building, just in Davenport schools, to just put it out there that way. I think for transparency's sake, we need to be upfront, and if we have to go through this ISEA tracker that would say, here's where we stand in the district, but to say we don't have any or not release any numbers, I think it's a transparency issue on our part.
I don't disagree, but then that puts me in a rock and a hard place when I have a Department of Education that recommends that we don't put out this information. Do you see what I'm saying? Well,
Recommends but didn't mandate it, correct?
I'm
just saying, because other districts are putting it out there.
I interpret recommendations as mandates.
Director Snyder?
I have a question in regards to the masks, like in the classrooms. Have we found, or has there been any discussion on how that's affecting like instruction? Are teachers allowed to drop their masks when they, I mean, every one of us has spoke here at the table tonight and we've all dropped our masks so that we're clear. I would hope that we're giving our kids the same courtesy so that they can.
We were. That was part of the protocol. Our teachers, as well as our students, when we say masks, I'm gonna use the generic term face coverings. We saw a couple individuals tonight that had the face shield. Those are perfectly acceptable. We know we have teachers that are more. They have the option to use either of those, and the way we've been approaching this issue up until this week was, if you were teaching in the front of the room and your students were more than 6 feet away, you could take down the mask and move in a completely different direction, in the sense of being able to have the conversation so that the students could see your lips, they could see your facial expressions, and it's hard to tell if someone's smiling behind this mask and,
Sure.
and affirming good work or job well done. It's much harder to do that. So the difficulty is coming in right now in terms of the science. The science is suggesting that perhaps there's an aerosol effect in terms of the COVID virus lingering in a space longer than they thought it would be. And if you move into that space, perhaps it's perhaps a little bit more risky. Again, I'm not a scientist. I'm just listening to what they're saying. But I'm very proud of the work that we've done to keep people safe in this district so far, and I want to maintain that as much as possible. And I don't want to wait for the issues to pop up. And we're going to ask teachers and we're going to ask students to find a face covering that suits them and to wear that when they're in our buildings. And I'm going to ask the board that once we enact this rule later in the week, that we abide by that also. I know, Dr. Beck, you're the scientist of the group. Is there anything that I misspoke of with regard to of science so far? And I don't mean to lean on you, but
Not that I know of, although I'll be honest, I haven't done a search or an update on what the most recent mask suggestions are in about 2 weeks. So they could change. But as far as I know, we are finding out that 6 feet and masks is better than
Right.
6 feet only, so.
Correct. Good question, though. Very good question.
Director Gosa?
I drop my mask because some people read lips. That's why I do it. My other question for the return to learn part, and I did make a board request on this that'll get read here in a little bit about sending out a survey to students and parents as well as staff to find out what things are working and what aren't. So obviously we can improve that stuff. I have a high schooler doing the ingenuity, and it is a crap load of work that gets put on him, you know, and he does sports, obviously, so he's worried that he's not going to be able to play, so he's spending all of his free time doing all that. My question is, where are we at with that zero term from making up the stuff from last year's? Are all of our students on track at completing that? Do we know?
So when you say on track, I mean, we've offered the credits. Some of our students that are on the Ingenuity, the 4 classes have been too much, and so we have offered to those students to drop a course or 2. They're supposed to be consulting with their counselor to make sure it's not putting them behind from a graduation. We've got some extended time on zero term. If you are in Ingenuity, you can go past the actual end of the term to continue to work on those courses. But yeah, as far as the opportunities for the students, the high school principals had to stretch out because there's just not enough English teachers to teach that course. So it may not just be in zero term; it may be in zero term, A term, or first term and second term. But that's where we're going to complete. So our hope is, like our calendar is, when we get to second semester, we're back on pace with where the K through 8 is. I think at third quarter, the end of third quarter is the exact same amount of time. So by the end of first semester, we're all caught up.
So, and with the Ingenuity thing, they can, instead of doing the 4, they can drop down to 2, right?
Yes, that's what we offer to our students.
Okay. I hope my son's not watching this because we told him he had to do all 4. We didn't even give him the option to drop down to 2.
And again, several of our students are being extremely successful. We talked about the 700 and some that don't have a teacher assigned to them. When we were talking about it with curriculum, many of those students are actually doing quite well in those classes just on their own. That's how talented they are. It's just the kids that are, really struggling because they're not getting feedback.
And what is the percentage of participation? Is everybody participating, or do we still have people that do we have students that are not participating?
We do, actually. We just, Court Guy earlier today sent me a list of the students who have showed absolutely no participation and maybe a course or a topic. And so we're reaching out. That's a conversation. The principals are listening today. That's an early conversation tomorrow with the high school principals, especially about reaching out to those families to find out, is this a course that you're just not wanting to continue in, or is this a barrier? I mean, we've been doing that for the last 3 weeks, but we're really drilling down in as deep as we can to try to find, these last group of kids for some reason that's just showing they're not moving forward on some of the Ingenuity courses.
Okay.
It is a little overwhelming. With the conversations I've heard from, again, I brought those associate principals in, is just when you open that up, it shows 271 assignments. Well, the one assignment is a 90-second video. But you don't know that when you're looking at that. You're looking at 271 assignments like, I can't do this course. Whereas once you get in, some of those are very quick. I mean, you move through, but you got to open everything up. I mean, it's daunting to look at.
I know. That's where all these gray hairs came from. So they will reach out to the student. Are you finding with the students that aren't participating, is it more of a high school level, or is there more numbers in like K through 6, 7th and 8th?
I could get you those numbers. I wouldn't want to comment on that right now, just because we've spent so much of our time has been invested getting everybody enrolled and all of the breakdowns in the system. That's just been it so now the real choice of does somebody want to come back, which is we've talked about this change week window where people are coming back from the online, that'll happen the second week of October. to kind of offer to families, okay, is this working out for you? Do you need to come back into hybrid? And of course, our hybrids can go to online, but we're really just trying to continue through our mentors, our success coaches, talk to those families and continue to reach out to them. So I can get the statistics for you, but I don't have that off the top of my head, no.
If you can get that, that'd be great. And then my other question, I think it's probably gonna be a Gary Sloat question. I have heard some parents say that MediaCom won't even come in certain areas and hook up internet. Have we ran into that issue? And if so, how is that being resolved?
I'm unaware of any place that MediaCom has not had activity in regards to hooking them up for the internet. I've had a couple of addresses presented to me, and when we checked on it, no, we deliver service to that. That's not a problem, so we can get there. There are people who are not in a current MediaCom area, and in that case, we extend MiFi unit to those people.
Okay, you can use those little Wi-Fi.
Yep.
Okay.
So for example, we reached out to MediaCom with some individuals, and one thing MediaCom won't do is, let's say, for example, if there's someone that lives, way out in the, they're not going to put a 1/4 mile cable down to get that house connected. But that's when all of a sudden we'll step in with our MiFis and get them all connected. But there isn't a neighborhood issue or a housing issue. When we give them an address and say this house needs this connection, I have found them to be very compliant and doing so in a very expeditious manner. Gary, do you have recent statistics in terms of connectivity? How many households have been connected by MediaCom in the last?
Yeah,
I know my dad is probably 4 days old already. But.
Our current numbers are we've extended service to 586 families. We've successfully installed 232 of those. 68 are remaining in schedule, are scheduled for install. We have moved 25 families to Wi-Fi. We've had 44 of those families already had internet, and we're going to stay with the way they had it. We had 42 families cancel, and we have 175 families that we are currently working on. We've reached out to them multiple times, and we're having a hard time getting them to follow up with the installation and that sort of thing. Or they've just learned about the service and have gotten back to us so that we can get them scheduled. Once we get their application in and it's confirmed, it takes about between 5 and 10 days to get that installed in their home.
Okay. Would you be able to send that data to the board so we have all those numbers?
Sure.
And then where are we at with all the hotspots? I think we purchased like 100 of them, right? Are they all being utilized? Are we going to need more, or?
Right now, I think we have between 40 and 50 deployed throughout the district. High schools are still holding on to some of those and solving problems that they have with them. We've actually gotten 18 units out to the Cross Creek families to make sure that they were up and online and stuff. So we're making every effort to get those done. We're trying to make it work for everyone.
Thank you.
Sure.
I know I'm not called on, but I'd like to give Gary a shout out. We had a very similar situation where an elementary family did not have, and I mean, literally the next day they had a hotspot. He connected personally with the family and made it happen. So a shout out to their department. They're moving as quickly as they can.
Director Hayes. Question for you, Gary, regarding the hotspots in Cross Creek. Now, is that like in one central location and more than one family can use it?
Yes. I think we've actually broken some of the numbers down by the number of families served and the number of students in given families that get serviced that way. One family had 5 kids, and we hooked them up with 2 different MiFi sets so that the kids could be at different places and still be able to get on, do their homework, that sort of thing, try and make it accommodating. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. My next question is for Rob. Rob, how does the dual program work with the Return to Learn plan?
Are you talking about the 0 term or making sure that all the classes?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
Marianne Corbin and Daniel Marvin at the ESCC, we've met with Jay Chelf, and that schedule meets. It's part of having the 0 term makes it more possible. If we would not have had that, we would have had some tough scheduling conflicts. But that basically was taking the 4th quarter and dropping it back into And so we didn't have any of those scheduling conflicts where they were going to have to start choosing between a course that they didn't have in their 4-year plan. So we believe that we're on pace for them. I've not heard anything to say different at our early meeting that we probably had 3 weeks ago.
And everything is working out well and on schedule for the new cohort that just came in for 9th grade?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question because I don't think they actually take one of those classes until the end of first semester, or I'm sorry, the start of second semester, but I will check on that. I don't think they're actually enrolled in a class in the first semester as they're really working on their transition, but I'll get an answer on that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on the Return to Learn and Platforms update? Director Gosa.
The AP classes, those are only available in person and not on the online option, right?
Zero term? Yeah, Corey, can you step up? I mean, just because I want to make sure, because we've been back and forth on this as far as how we're going to be able to offer this.
Because I think some of the surrounding school districts do offer, so I just wanted to make sure we're.
So in our return to learn plan, we added a 0 term to recoup lost learning time from last year. AP courses are typically 3 terms. We were going to start that first term, AP courses, with the priority of the classes that they were missing from last school year.
Were you asking more about the online students? Or?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
Will it be available for the online students starting second term?
And based on what Dr. Kabilski just, he talked about us potentially pivoting to our own teachers using Edgenuity first term. When that occurs, we will. Our plan is to have AP course offerings online starting first term.
Perfect. Thank you. Hey, and you're doing a great job as well. I would like to acknowledge you. And Rob, you're doing pretty good yourself.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Any other discussion on the Return to Learn and Platforms update? Okay, board requests. From Director Gosa, I'd like the district to send out a survey to students, parents, and staff regarding online and hybrid learning platforms. Rationale is that feedback would be helpful to improve the district's learning plans. Is there a second?
Second.
And when do you want this?
As soon as reasonably.
Okay.
I didn't know whether to ask for an agenda item or request for information.
I think this would be more of a,
Request for
yeah. From Director Snyder, what coaching and assistant positions in our district are unpaid and covered by volunteers? What's our policy, administration regulations, and dictates how many kids it takes before a team needs to have an assistant? This is an information request. The rationale is studies show that when students are engaged, they do better in school. We need a fair and equitable system for saying our coaches and assistant coaches. I feel the value of our students in these programs. We should support them by asking for volunteers. Is there a second?
Second.
Whoa.
Everyone. That's a first. And when this is an information item, you'd like this as soon as possible?
Yes.
From Director Snyder and Director Hayes. This is an agenda item for a discussion on our policy on conduct in regards to hatred of any kind, racism, sexism, bullying, all hatred. I want a zero tolerance policy in place. No student or staff should have to experience any hatred in any of our DCSD buildings. Way past due on getting a firm grasp on this. We owe our students and our staff something. Is there a second?
Second.
This is an agenda item, so I'm assuming as soon as possible. Dr. Klein, Jerome, This is an agenda item, have a board presentation about the TAG program, how students qualify, curriculum, numbers of students, etc. We need to be informed about student achievement in this area is often overlooked. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh. Man, train's leaving the station. Would this be okay as a committee of the whole item also?
I'm sorry, is what?
It's a committee of the whole presentation also, not
Yes.
necessarily
That
agenda
would be-
item?
Yes.
Okay. We'll put ASAP on that. Dr. Klein Jerome would like Gary Sinclair to create a list of 15 or 20 areas where the board could make budget cuts for both this year and or next. No areas are off the table, but would hope many of the options would have the least impact on students. The list should be shared directly with the board. We will be experiencing unforeseen expenses, and we need to look at ways to keep the budget not only this year, but next year in the black. We also need to start discussing budget issues by November and not at the last minute. Is there a second?
Second.
And she'd like this by November 28th of 2020. And this is an information request. Director Klein Jerome, an agenda item, the whole quarterly evaluation of the superintendent to review progress on reports on district goals and individual professional development plans and goals. We agree at the last evaluation, we need to follow a timeline for evaluation of the superintendent as developed by the IASB and the SIA. Is there a second?
Second.
I don't know if this would be an agenda item if we've already agreed to it.
Well, wouldn't it be in a closed meeting? So it's in, the agenda would be that we're having this evaluation?
Yeah, okay. And October 12th is the date for a regular board meeting to discuss it. Any other board requests? Administrative reports.
We have no additional reports, Mr. President.
Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.